Criminal Justice Enforcement Powers COVID 2019. We have seen that because of the lack of understanding by government have actually brought this emergency legislation to where it is today. If they had done what we had asked them to do at the very start, was to separate wet pubs from nightclubs, we wouldn't have the problem that you're trying to legislate for today. In Limerick, there was 127 wet pubs closed, and there was 20 pubs opened that could serve food. In East Limerick, there was 6, and in West Limerick there was 14. That has now changed, that there is 27 opened because they put in food facilities at their own cost so they could try and save their business. Now we have 22 open in West Limerick and we have 9 opened in East Limerick. But we still have about 120 wet pubs that are closed. From where I am living, I'd have to travel 15 miles if I want to have a sociable drink. Now, I'm not a big drinker myself, but I would like a social occasion where I would go to meet people. But what the government had done is their lack of understanding. They were sending people from a rural setting into an overpopulated area to have a drink. So they were basically putting them in line to get COVID-19, because if they had opened their own local pubs, which would normally have 10 or 12 people during the week and maybe 20 the weekend, they would have been local people in their local area. They wouldn't have to go anywhere else. But they allowed every town and city open their pubs because they had footfall the way they could serve food. This is not fair. Again, the government never thought of rural Ireland. We have seen since the very start that a lot of the cities were the ones that have been breaking the rules. Why? Because if all the places were opened, they wouldn't have been congregating in the amount of settings that were there, and you wouldn't have the problems of trying to introduce emergency legislation. Today, I was completely, fully opposed to this bill. But since the government have been rowing back today, as the day is going on, they have rowed back that they will not enter into people's houses. But I don't know if that's actually factually the truth. Because in my reading of the bill, this bill gives power to the minister to introduce regulation without debate or vote in the Oireachtas. There must be a due process if there is legislation being brought in front of the Oireachtas. And this cannot be solely to a minister. This has to be debated within the Oireachtas. Yes, I welcome the wet pubs opening. But ye have caused the problem in the first place yourselves by not allowing them opening, by putting them down under the same legislation as nightclubs. The same thing happened with our nursing homes. And our respite centres were put under the same regulation, and the respite centres were not allowed open. Yet since the very, very start, the government have stopped people in rural Ireland that have social distance all their lives, have lost everything in rural Ireland, their creameries, their post offices. The last thing left for people to congregate was in their local pub. Our elderly population, they didn't always go for a drink, they went for a minimal to meet their neighbours, because you've taken everything else. And it's not just this government, it's the previous governments. Ye have been closing down rural Ireland. And now it's about time that she actually gave rural Ireland and give equality back to rural Ireland. And you can see now that all the problems since COVID in the bar situations was caused by yourselves because you would not allow equality for country versus city. You went completely, gave everything to the cities and the large towns because they were able to afford with footfall and tourist destinations. but you had no regard whatsoever for people in rural settings, except that you were going to put them in their way to go into overpopulated areas to put them in for COVID-19.